Hey guys, how's it going? Alex Scott here with Consordini.com. Thank you so much for checking out another one of our super cool studio gear reviews. In this video, I'm taking a look at a free VST plugin bundle from Noiz-Lab in conjunction with HomeStudioMastering.com. This is the Noiz-Lab LE Mastering Bundle. Okay, so this is a free bundle of mastering-oriented plugins. There's 5 plugins in total that come with this little bundle: a compressor, a convolver, which is basically a reverb, an equalizer, a limiter, and a Monomizer, which is a stereo imaging kind of management tool. And we're just going to take a quick look at each one and listen to them. I have an unmastered track here from the record None Such Palace that I did with my good friend Veronique Van Pelt. Incredibly cool indie pop record, which is currently out on Spotify and all major streaming platforms. You just go search None Such Palace. You will find it. It's a fantastic record. We had a great time making it, but that's kind of the track we're going to be taking a look at today. Now, I mastered this record originally using all analog gear in my big studio back home. I also use Ozone for a lot of my personal mastering needs. You know, I don't claim to be some amazing mastering engineer. I do know how to master. I've done mastering for quite a few records in my day, but it's still, you know, it's one of those really advanced things that you need to spend a lot of time working on and learning about in order to really truly be great at mastering. But a lot of us, you know, if we're producing at home, we don't necessarily have the luxury of, you know, having the budget or the ability or the connections necessarily to be able to send our stuff off for mastering. Now, there's some other things out there. You know, there's kind of these all-in-one mastering plugins from companies like, you know, IK Multimedia's T-Rax has a few in that. There's some basic mastering stuff in most DAWs in terms of multiband compressors and this kind of stuff, but it's notoriously complicated, especially when you get into something like a multiband compressor. It's a really advanced, whether it's a plugin or, you know, definitely a piece of rack gear. It can be kind of complex to really be able to dial something like that in and understand how to use it. So what Noiz-Lab has done with these 5 plugins is just tried to simplify everything down into a really simple and streamlined kind of step-by-step process of adding and using each of these little plugins. And they're all very, very simple. And as I've been messing around with them, they do sound fantastic. So first of all, we have this compressor here. Now, as you can see, we have some of the typical things that we would associate with compressor. We have a threshold, a little gain reduction meter down here, and we do have makeup gain as well, which is a very handy feature. But other than that, we don't have attack or release or anything like that. It's just kind of a one and done. You can think of it as a one knob kind of compressor. And that is the deal with most of these plugins. They're all extremely simple, and they're designed to kind of take the complexity out of the process and just give you results really, really quickly. So the compressor here has 4 modes: glue, balance, punch, and impact. And they are all sort of presets that just change how the compressor is behaving kind of behind the scenes. So what we'll go ahead and do is I'm just going to play the track for a moment just so we can hear what we're starting with. So that's our track. Real nice, right? So let's go ahead and start bringing in this compressor. First, we've got it on glue mode, so we're just going to bring our threshold down a little bit, say -7. As you know, again, with mastering stuff, maybe -10, we don't necessarily want to be doing a ton of gain reduction. You know, we don't want to necessarily be punching this down into -12 or certainly -24. We want to just gently let the compressor ride the track. Start hearing kick in. So that's glue. That's balance. This is punch. And here's impact. Now, it's really clean and transparent and pretty subtle, all things considered. And that's, you know, these are plugins that are geared towards mastering, so we're going to expect that. You know, when we think about mastering compressors in particular, they don't have much character to them. You don't, certainly not like grit or anything like that we might expect out of a vintage style compressor like an 1176 or something. They're generally very transparent, and you can hear that it's really designed to work on program material or you know, a full mix, not just an individual element. Though I'm sure you could use it for that if you wanted to. But it's interesting because each of these four modes definitely has its own kind of vibe going on. You know, glue is very gluey. It feels kind of in the middle to me. Balance is the most aggressive. And it really kind of brings out the low end in an interesting way, and has a tendency to pump a little bit depending on where your threshold is at. And then punch and impact, you can definitely hear what those do to the transients, you know, to the kick drum and the snare drum and all this kind of stuff. Now, another interesting thing that we have here is this saturation setting, which is actually kind of a distortion almost, or a saturation. So if we set it back on glue, I'll go through, there's 3 different saturation modes: soft, medium, and hard. So here's soft. You do something to the way I see things. Never look the same at back. You can hear a tiny little bit of breakup on the medium on the top end, and then hard. And that's really where you hear it start kicking in. Now, this isn't something I would necessarily recommend using, especially on like the hard mode in mastering, because that gets a little bit extreme to do to your whole track. But the soft definitely adds a little bit of nice color. Now, of these 4 modes, my personal favorite is the impact. Watching the meter, it's definitely the fastest of the 4 modes, and it seems to have a really nice way of bringing out the transients. So very cool. But you know, 4 great little easy to use, easy to audition and demo and switch back and forth, and they all sound really nice in their own way. So now, second, we have this convolver, and this is one that I can see certain applications this being amazing for. So for example, if you are like a singer-songwriter and you're just doing like maybe guitar and vocal demos or piano and vocal, really stripped back stuff, and you just want an easy way to add a little bit of reverb and ambiance and life to your tune, this would be great for that. This is definitely not, you know, I don't really associate any kind of reverb with mastering. I know there are some engineers out there who will occasionally use a little bit of reverb, especially if they just want to give the whole track a more live feel. But the way this particular plugin is set up, and especially how it sounds, I don't really see it being in that context. This, I think, is the weakest one of the bunch. So we can just hear, what I'll do is I'll actually crank the effect way up, and then you have the solo effect option so you can hear just what the reverb is doing. That's studio. This is hall. And then church. And then if we blend it back in, again, studio. Then we have some basic controls down here, high pass and low pass filters on the Verb, and we can switch it between stereo and mono, and then we do have a makeup gain, which is kind of interesting. Other than that, just this amount, you know, in percentage points of reverb that we're doing. I think it sounds okay. I've definitely heard better free reverb plugins. The 3 IRs or algorithms or whatever that it's working with here, they sound very digital to me. They sound a little bit harsh, which is common with a lot of reverb plugins, both very expensive ones all the way down to free ones. It's hard to do reverb digitally and make it sound really smooth and nice, like I personally like my verbs to sound. So this one, again, I see a limited application in the world of mastering, but if you need a solid reverb plugin that you might use on a send within your session or something like that, could definitely work there. Studio seems to be the darkest and the shortest tail. Hall is kind of in the middle, and then the church is very bright and has a much wider and longer sort of decay. So that is the convolver. Next, we have a basic EQ. And this Equalizer is just kind of exactly what you would expect. We have 6 different bands, and we can do some things in terms of like stereo versus mid-side processing. So at the top, we have an option to solo either the mid or the side of our mix, or hear it in full stereo. And then for each of these points, we actually change whether or not they're affecting left and right, whether they're just affecting the mid channel or whether they're affecting the side channel, which is really cool. Mid-side EQ, especially on the top end, is something that I like to do a lot. I like to take a nice big shelf and draw it out on the sides because it really brings a lot of width to your mix. It makes that really sparkly stuff, reverbs and percussion, it's stuff that you may have panned to the outside of your mix. It helps to brighten that up and make your mix feel a lot wider. So that's very cool. And again, you can change each band, whether it's affecting mid separately, side separately, or the full stereo signal, and you have everything that you would kind of expect. dB up and down. It can go all the way up to 12, plus or minus 12, adjustable Q on everything. So it's fully parametric. And that's super neat. It's a great, very transparent sounding equalizer. It reminds me a lot of the EQ in Ozone. So that's our EQ. Next is our limiter. And this is really where you do a lot of your gain control in mastering. This particular limiter is pretty sensitive. So especially when we have this maximize function, which is going to help to draw out and really even out your signal and give it that really kind of polished, consistent, radio ready sort of sound. So we have obviously our threshold. We do have a ceiling, which you're always going to want to set at -1 if you're doing digital distribution. You can turn maximize on or off. You have fast, medium, slow, which is going to affect your attack and release times, gain reduction meter, and then transient emphasis, soft, medium, and hard. So we're just going to start about maybe a -3 here. We'll listen to these, and then I'll play around with the transient thing.
You do something to the so this is fast.
Medium.
Never look the same at that color green.
And slow.
You may be away each day, but
Now, because we have a lot of fast transients on this song, the fast is going to sound the best, and I can kind of dig it a little lower.
never has anyone so reached my heart.
You can really hear it start to dig in. Here's without.
Never look the same at that
And with.
color green. You may be
So you can hear it's really making the mix feel quite a bit louder and fuller and more present. I do kind of wish that they had added a little bit of metering here, maybe a LUFS meter or something like that, so you could see what's going on with your loudness. But overall, I think it's a really nice sounding limiter, especially when we bring in this transient.
away each day, but you do something to the
Soft.
way I see things. Never look the same at that color green. You may be away each day, but never have.
Now, setting your threshold a little more gently, and especially this hard transient setting, because of the nature of this song, it's got a lot of snappy kicks and snappy snares and stuff. There's a lot of detail in those elements. It sounds really nice. It retains a lot of the punch and a lot of the clarity in those transient elements. So that's very, very cool. But again, just really simple, really easy to use, nice and transparent, but it is indeed doing its job. And then the final thing that we have in here is this Monomizer, which I think is kind of interesting. And this is what we in the mastering world would call an elliptical filter. So the goal of this is really to manage the stereo information in the low end of your mix. Okay, so we have this kind of frequency chart, you could call it over here, this representation of what the plugin is doing. And at the top end, we have 320 hertz, which is right in your mids, kind of your low mid region, all the way down to 20 hertz. And if you have ever worked on a project that's gone to vinyl, you will know that it's incredibly important to have your bottom end be very narrow. You essentially everything below around 320 hertz, 200 hertz, 100 hertz, whatever, you want it to actually be in mono, because if you have really wide stereo bass information, that can actually make the vinyl cutting process fail and can damaged turntables that try to play back your music. There's all kinds of weird problems that happen when you have wide stereo bass information when you're going to vinyl. But it's not really just a matter of vinyl. That's true really in any mix. You never really want extremely wide low-end information, because even if you're not dealing with vinyl, it can cause some really weird problems. Like if you're listening in a car or something, you can get all kinds of weird phase cancellation stuff. Your mix can actually end up sounding really thin. And, also in most systems in general, whether it's a car system or a home theater system or whatever, you don't have two subwoofers. You don't have a left and a right sub. You have one subwoofer. So it's usually just a good idea to make the low end of your mix mono, and that's exactly what this is designed to do. So we have this amount of make mono, as the knob says, and we have this kind of variable curve here, which is going to tell you, kind of where the effect starts, where the effect finishes, and then everything below that will be fully mono or variably. And then you can actually change the shape of that curve to kind of deal with how it's processing that stereo information on the low end of your mix. So this is kind of an odd tool, but it's a very handy one. And it addresses something that I think a lot of people have problems with, which is stereo information in your low end. I get lots of mixes from people, especially in like the hip hop world and stuff, where they've gone in and maybe they have a synth bass part in their track. And what's happened is that they found some big killer, super lush, like saw sound or something that they're using for the bass element in their track, but they haven't made it mono. And so you end up with this really, really wide low-end information that's spread throughout the stereo spectrum. And I have to go in and use an elliptical filter like this one to bring that back in. But then it can kind of get funky with how it affects the rest of the sound. So this is a great tool for managing exactly that on your own, and just making sure that there's no elements of your mix that have super low information that's also really wide in your stereo image. It's just it's one of those technical things that's really important in mastering, and something that a lot of mastering engineers will do as part of their process. So I love that they've included this. I think it's great. That is pretty much it in terms of what we've got going on with this Noiz-Lab Mastering Bundle. I think for a free little suite of plugins, this is fantastic. Again, the reverb, the convolver reverb, doesn't sound great, but it's free. Kind of who cares? Everything else sounds really, really nice, and it really is everything that you need to master your track, or do a very basic kind of quick and dirty master for yourself at home. It's also a great resource for people who want to learn a little bit more about the mastering process and how it works and what kinds of tools you need without getting overwhelmed by too many settings. Now, none of these really come with any presets as such. I mean, these like mode buttons that are present in each one are kind of presets in their own right, which is cool. It makes it very, very easy, very, very simple. Again, especially for people who aren't super familiar with mastering. And beyond that, they've just made each plugin so easy to use and so streamlined that you really don't need like presets of any kind. You don't really need to worry about that. It's just you pull it up, you kind of click around and see what sounds good and feels good to your ear, and it, it's going to get it done. Now, you are still going to need to understand at least a little bit about how mastering works, and that's where homestudiomastering.com comes in. I believe that they have some tutorials and documentation and stuff that are going to help you understand how to use these and what's going on, and some kind of step-by-step stuff that you can follow along with and get more acquainted with the whole process and get into a workflow with them. But aside from that, I think it's a really great little bundle. I think anybody who wants to try mastering on their own, feels like they need to start mastering their tracks a little bit more seriously, and wants to try to do it themselves, I think it's a fantastic resource. It sounds really good, nice and transparent. It's going to get the job done just fine. So if you guys are looking for a great free mastering suite, Noiz-Lab's Mastering Bundle LE Edition, available from homestudiomastering.com. No affiliation with us or anything. I just found this browsing around the web, wanted to check it out, and I was really impressed. So there you go. But what do you guys think? Is this something that you'd be interested in? Do you have other mastering plugins, free or paid, that you guys really like to use? Whatever the case may be, definitely let me know in the comments down below. Always appreciate hearing from you. If you have not yet subscribed to Consordini's YouTube channel, please do that. Click that big shiny red button and be sure to tap the notification bell to be kept up to date with our new videos. If you want to give the video a like or share, that's always awesome as well. But regardless, my name is Alex Scott with Consordini.com. Thank you again so very much for watching. Really appreciate it. And we will see you in the next video.